Bien, bonjour à tous, bienvenue à l'école 42. Voilà, on a attendu un peu les derniers qui vont arriver. Alors moi je suis François-Xavier, je m'occupe là en partie des partenariats, des programmes étudiants de l'entrepreneuriat, notamment du programme Matrice. Et c'est dans un cadre justement Matrice 42 Fondation IOTA qu'on lance aujourd'hui un cycle à la fois de conférences et qui va nous amener à un événement les 11 et 12 juin dont on vous reparlera à la fin. On a appelé ça Block Days et Ledger Days pour pouvoir justement travailler sur la question d'un avenir distribué. En tous les cas, comment est-ce que justement les nouvelles technologies de ce type-là offrent des potentialités complètement différentes et dans une multitude de sujets. On en reparle tout à l'heure. Là, l'idée, c'était simplement de dire un mot de bienvenue, de remercier la Fondation IOTA d'être parmi nous et de venir justement nous partager avec nous à la fois sa technologie et puis ses avancées récentes. Et dire que pour l'école, c'est toujours un sujet que d'être en pointe sur ces technos qui émergent, qui apportent un certain nombre de potentialités complètement nouvelles. Et voilà, on se fait une espèce de devoir de suivre toujours ça, et on sait que pour les étudiants qui sont ici, vous en êtes particulièrement friands, et ce que nous, on aime en plus, c'est de justement pouvoir croiser cet aspect technicien des choses avec des acteurs extérieurs qui ont justement un prisme différent, qui le voient depuis leur business, depuis leur position de régulateur, depuis plein d'autres positions, et pouvoir justement discuter avec ça et imaginer et construire des choses ensemble, et puis aussi réfléchir ensemble. Et ça va être l'objet ce soir. Alors pour ceux qui nous rejoignent pour la première fois, juste un mot sur l'école. L'école 42 donc, a été fondée en 2013. C'est donc une école assez récente. Il y a aujourd'hui à peu près 3500 étudiants dans l'école, avec des campus à Paris, à San Francisco, et puis des petites sœurs qui sont en train d'ouvrir un peu partout. Le principe, c'est un apprentissage dans l'école sans cours, sans professeur, sans emploi du temps, sans tout ce qui fait une école d'habitude, et pour autant c'est bien une école où justement l'apprentissage se fait principalement pair à pair, principalement dans la découverte, principalement dans le test and learn, et c'est ça qui est véritablement intéressant, et où, à partir des compétences acquises en ayant réalisé un projet, on va vers un autre, et puis un autre, et puis un autre, ce qui fait que chaque étudiant suit un parcours qu'il a lui-même décidé et qu'il a lui-même construit, et qui correspond d'autant mieux à son besoin et à sa façon d'apprendre. Et donc là-dedans, c'est hyper intéressant d'insérer en permanence des nouvelles connaissances, des nouvelles technos, des nouvelles façons de faire, parce que chacun y trouve quelque chose, et du coup construit un parcours, une originalité, une façon de voir et la techno et le monde, et c'est ça qui est particulièrement intéressant. Donc voilà, donc ce soir, place à la Fondation IOTA, aux partenaires également. Je salue l'INSEAD et ENG qui vont aussi animer ce meet-up avec nous. Si vous avez des questions, sentez-vous entièrement libre. On est là pour partager les enjeux techniques, les enjeux de vision aussi, les enjeux économiques, et puis trouver des solutions et des voies de passage nouvelles justement autour de cette question des technologies distribuées, des nouvelles manières de certifier, d'authentifier, de créer de la traçabilité. Et pour le coup, on en a besoin partout. Bien souvent, le champ justement de ces technologies avancées, autour des cryptos, autour de la blockchain, est très justement obstrué par le sujet Bitcoin ou pas Bitcoin. En fait, il y a plein d'autres voies de passage, et justement, toute la techno IOTA, qui justement ne repose pas sur une blockchain, propose ça. La question, c'est comment est-ce que ça s'applique dans le monde. Ça sort juste d'un sujet tech. Voilà, c'est l'une des questions qui nous est posée ce soir, et à nous tous ensemble d'y réfléchir et d'apporter des solutions forcément plus intéressantes que si on avait essayé de réfléchir chacun de notre côté. Will, c'est à toi. Merci beaucoup d'être parmi nous. Je crois que tu commences par nous présenter un peu la Fondation IOTA. Alors, je ne sais plus si... Ah oui, pardon, j'aurais peut-être dû faire tout ça en anglais. Désolé. Je ne sais pas si on le fait.
C'est pas grave, je vais passer en anglais après.
Oui, voilà. Oui, c'est l'habitude. Mais voilà, merci à la Fondation IOTA d'être avec nous, d'être notre partenaire aussi donc pour l'événement à venir. Et puis pour ceux qui sont intéressés, hein, sachez-le, on prépare donc l'événement du 11 et 12, les Block Days et Ledger Days. Il y a des formations au Techno IOTA pour une team de mentors qui commence demain. Pour ceux qui veulent rentrer dans la techno, le 8 juin, vous trouverez tout ça sur l'intra. Et puis ensuite, l'event à proprement parler, les 11 et 12 juin, on vous explique comment ça marche tout à l'heure. Voilà, merci Will, à toi.
Merci. Je suis français, mais je vais passer en anglais. C'est un streaming, plein de gens qui vont nous regarder. So I'll speak English. Also, one of my colleagues, Lewis, is speaking English, and we have a few invites as well that will give some presentation in English. If we speak too fast, just say so, and we'll have some Q&A we can do also in French. So thanks a lot for having us. It's really exciting. It's second round we're coming to École 42, and then we'll be back in 2 weeks. So that's really great. My name is Wilfried Pimenta. I'm originally from France. I live in Norway, and I work as the head of business development at the IOTA Foundation. And we're a non-for-profit, so business development is something a bit different. It has to do much more about partnership and co-creation, and we'll tell about this during today's meetup. So today we have from the IOTA Foundation myself and Lewis that is here. He will take the mic, and then we'll dive into the technology behind the IOTA Tangle and some aspects related to the ecosystem and how we generate innovation. The agenda for today, I'm going to give you a bit of an update from the IOTA Foundation's perspective, dive into some use cases so you understand a bit the landscape to which we participate in. Lewis will take the microphone to talk about the technology. And then before we shift to actually give the microphone to NG Lab, that will explain from a corporate point of view why this landscape is relevant. We'll have Andrew from INSEAD, Professor of Strategy, that will give a few words about some surveys they've been doing recently around disruptive technologies and what is to come, what are big companies looking into, what are they interested in when they're thinking about technology. At the end of the meetup, we'll basically be discussing and giving some announcements related to some activities we want to pursue with École 42, and we look very much forward to that. So let's dive in. A lot of people associate us with blockchain. We are a distributed ledger, but we're not blockchain. And for us, we are very purpose-driven. So I thought to start again from the purpose and the landscape of challenges that we're trying to resolve. So before we talk about the technical aspect, let's look at what is happening in the world. There are some big trends to account for business and public sector, and those are related to silos that are being dismantled. Companies have spent ages building silos and building competitiveness based on IP. I protect my data, I protect my customers. But the challenge today is that in the digital transformation era, data is starting to flow. Big companies cannot hold ownership of clients. Everything is opening up. So banks are becoming open banks, right? We know the term of open banking, but that's not specific to banking. All organizations are going to go through the same process of opening up the gates. We don't see too much here, but... And now, with the Internet of Things coming up in the loop, this trend is just going to be reinforced because a lot of companies are going to build value out of data. Data is going to come from everywhere, and we're going to pass over the data from one company to another, from the public sector to the companies. We're all going to depend on each other, data streams. Everything will be open, and we need to redefine this whole landscape. Data is the new oil. I come from Norway, which is an oil-producing country, so it resonates a lot for me. But that's, everybody starts to understand that, right? So the question is, how do you make that new money? From an IOTA perspective, what we've been looking at is the convergence between the Internet of Things and all those data streams. We can't really see it at all. This is a nice smart city behind. In a smart city context, what we see is that all connected devices will be interconnected. They will share information to one another. And then they're going to be able to pay each other in a real-time fashion. So the traditional company may be a challenge because it's usually positioned as an intermediary, but this is the new landscape. And IOTA is positioned there to actually make that reality happen. We call it the machine-to-machine economy. For some, it sounds a bit scary because it's like, machines, Terminator type of scenario, but it's not this, right? It's about convenience of citizens. And automation will help us have a better life. But it takes a new step. It takes the trust in machines so that they can trade and exchange information directly, peer-to-peer, without the intervention of humans, so we can enjoy and relax. We call it also the economy of things. That sounds a bit or less scary, but that's what we tackle at the IOTA Foundation. But for this reality to take place, we are focusing on 3 problems that needs to be addressed. The first one is trust in the data. So it sounds very easy to open the gates and here we go, but trust in the data is the first problem to be tackled. There's issues related to data integrity. So as we build new businesses, I generate data from IoT sensors in one place. Over time, you don't need to actually fetch all this data and host it in your own server. You let it where it will be. A lot of data will be distributed, but you need to trust that the data has not been changed, right? That's the notion of data integrity, the capacity to show that the data has not been changed. Then you transmit the data. Cybersecurity is really a big issue still. And now privacy, right? All those businesses sounds to be machine to machine, but actually it's about people. IoT devices telling a story about people. And we know very well privacy is a big, big challenge. Recently, there was a lot of scandals, and GDPR, protection of data from individuals in Europe, the new regulation is going to strengthen all those processes. This whole block is something really that we address fundamentally at IOTA. Because we look at those things and we kind of fix it, we have the right to play and combine it with something different, which is the ability for connected devices to pay one another. So machine-to-machine seamless transaction. Now that the data is secure, let's allow the connected device to pay one another. And this we tackle as well from what a lot of people know us about, which is the IOTA token. But that's important to understand. It's only one component of what we do, and it's actually independent from that one to some extent. It's a module, it's an add-on. Now, this is the technology kind of story. And as Andrew probably works towards those things every day, it's not all about this. It's about smart business models. You need to put those technologies together to see how you're going to generate profit, added value for humanity. This is something we tackle as well for the different partners we work with. All those problems, a lot of people have looked at blockchain as a potential solution. But when it comes to Internet of Things, there are some issues. So I show the typical case of Bitcoin, and if we fix to that, we see that there are some issues when it comes to public blockchains like Bitcoin. As those protocols become popular and more popular, they face a problem of scalability. As transactions line up to be in the next block, the fees are increasing because you need to incentivize miners to validate your transactions and put it into the next block. The fees increases and the queue increases. So there's an issue related to the scalability of public blockchain. So we looked at other approaches at the IOTA Foundation. Those issues are quite established, even from the founders of Ethereum. And there are some aspects related to conventional blockchains that are, for me, pretty ugly. My background is from the energy sector, so this is actually pretty outrageous when you think about Bitcoin, the conventional Bitcoin. The likelihood of Bitcoin succeeding to be the global monetary system is quite frightening. I don't know too much about the future of my child in that context. So we looked at that aspect as well. And if you look at the trend and what blockchain is achieving, it's moving from centralized to maybe decentralized, but with still some intermediaries. And when you look at Bitcoin or Ethereum and other type of conventional blockchains, there are some frictions in the system, and those are the miners, asking for money and burning energy. So we contemplate the last part, which is going completely distributed without intermediaries. So it's important to understand that the journey of blockchain, or let's call them distributed ledger technologies, it's still early stage, right? So you had Bitcoin, you had Ethereum, the Hyperledger, BigChainDB, look at those things as well. And then the IOTA is coming into the loop, but we're not anymore a blockchain. We are a distributed ledger technology provider, but we have removed the chain of blocks in order to deal with the issues that I mentioned earlier. Lewis is probably going to dive into those aspects afterwards, but our protocol looks pretty different from a traditional blockchain. It's non-linear. There's no more chain of blocks. I think I'll leave Lewis to dive into those aspects, so we make a sort of difference between our inputs here. The features of our ledger is that it's highly scalable. It's lightweight, so it doesn't consume a lot of energy. It allows, the first time ever, value transfer between digital entities without any fees. And you can use it also as a secure data protocol, separately from the value transfer features of the IOTA token. So this is where we basically focus on. And I was just giving some examples about how we build the technology stack to address those issues. So the Tangle is the big network, and some modules like the mask authenticated messaging that maybe some of you have looked into are typically belonging to what I call the trust in the data. Has nothing to do with value transfer. In the value transfer aspect, transactions, this is about the IOTA tokens, this is about flash channels. Lewis will talk about it. And then on that side, what is our role as an IOTA Foundation is that we'd like to think of ourselves as a co-creation hub. We enable innovation by doing matchmaking and allowing corporations, public sector, to demystify the technology and bring this to life. And by doing that process, they also contribute to shaping this as a standard for the Internet of Things. It's a collaborative effort to finalize the IOTA technology, because today we're still in the beta stage. We work in different industries. We'd like to think that we work for the industry and with the industry in shaping that standard. Mobility was one of the sectors that pulled us very much, and us being set up officially as a non-profit in Germany was quite helpful, so we developed quite a few relationships, but this is extending. In this digital transformation journey, sometimes it's hard to keep innovation in the silos, in those verticals. So some of our innovation are linking mobility to energy, smart charging, for instance. And you have other sectors that come into the loop. To give some examples, you have smart charging, which is a really cool case that demonstrates IOTA's ability to pay as a micropayment at zero fee. Vehicles in the future will not have any drivers because they are autonomous. The car still needs to pay for electricity. And the way it can do it is by holding a wallet with IOTA token, and you pay for the electricity that you get through a micro token streaming. And this is done at zero fee. It gets rid of the need for a contract or even a smart contract, because other technologies and blockchains have looked into this. But here you pay as a stream. It just doesn't exist, right? Those are the interesting features of IOTA. Continuous streaming of payment against electricity.
We are at the ELAT premises in Arnhem, and we are now at the test lab of ELAT, which is used for testing charge stations and electric vehicles. This is the world's first IOTA charging station being released today here in Arnhem. What's special about this charge station is that it can do direct payments from car to charger using just a cable, and it doesn't require any RFID card or any subscription. It just uses IOTA. IOTA is a cryptocurrency and a protocol, The cryptocurrency you can think of as it is used in Bitcoin, for example. And the protocol is much broader, so you can also use it for data transportation, data integrity and data security. Bitcoin is in this case not suitable because it requires a lot of fees to do a transaction, and IOTA is free of charge, so that makes it great for using it in these kind of use cases. And the most unique part here is that you can have real machine-to-machine communication. A car with its own wallet and the charger with its own wallet, and they do a direct communication and payment to each other fully autonomously. So you just plug in the car and it works. The importance of this charge station is to show that you can use cryptocurrencies and the underlying distributed ledgers to do things like this and to show the capabilities of these technologies and the potential. And the way we envision this is that you also can directly, for example, buy energy from a solar panel from your neighbor. Or in case of some kind of congestion, the charger can ask the car to deliver energy back to the grid and pay for that using IOTA. Of course, we cannot do this on our own. We need others to bring this further, so we would like to invite you to co-create and work with us together to bring this further.
So this is a really cool innovation, and it has the advantage of having extremely good partners. So Enexis, part of the LNLN, is the consortium of grid operators in the Netherlands, and their aim is to optimize the whole grid, right, decentrally. This is one piece of the puzzle, but they want this to be a co-creation exercise. So, they will open up the achievements they've done in terms of coding. The developers behind this project will come to École 42 in 2 weeks, and they can explain all of it. And we're also taking this innovation in testbed environments in Sweden, connected to smart buildings. You have smart chargers and a fleet of EVs. And the smart charger will be one of several smart chargers to pilot IOTA as a micropayment solution. So it's pretty nice. And when you think about it, this is just one component of a bigger picture, which we call smart community, which is actually the test beds for smart cities. It's a way to start scaling. So the smart chargers are there, but they belong to a bigger picture, where solar panels, rooftop solar panels, will generate extra electricity from your home and will be traded between smart meters, for instance. They will be aggregated, extra electricity, and sold through the smart chargers. It's then accepted by vehicles that continue on their journey and pay with IOTAs also for exiting or entering the smart city. It's a whole ecosystem, and it's not only an energy story, right? It's mobility, it's energy, it's real estate, it's digital transformation. It's a different way of looking at how all those solutions are going to innovate. So this is a project that we're doing in Sweden, and it's an open testbed, so we have the ability to bring on other partners. If you have a new solutions based on IOTA, we can bring it and start creating a sort of ecosystem. I was talking about the car element. We are quite heavily involved in mobility, and that's what we envision. So the car e-wallet functionality for electricity is not specific to electricity. There's no driver, so the future car will need to pay for electricity, for toll gates, for parking, for different features. So those are really interesting game changers that we look at. We also work in industrial IoT, so smart manufacturing, getting rid of the payment aspects and the token. This is all about data integrity. And different companies, I think I'll pass on that one, were demonstrating some of their work at the Hannover Messe in Germany. Companies like DXC or Fujitsu demonstrating how they integrate IOTA into their cloud operations to prove the supply chain for high-value, high-product manufacturing. So you can prove all the different steps that have been taken, and it's registered on the ledger as a source of proof. You can start building proofs of existence of data for Industry 4.0. We've launched a project which is also linked to NG's own participation a bit in our ecosystem, which is the data marketplace. The data marketplace is a proof of concept, but also an open innovation process. Through this project, we've installed IOTA in a testnet environment, but we We put it on connected devices at the office of some corporations that are trying IOTA and basically looking at how their connected devices can get paid directly for the data it shares. So we have sensors from different places in the world, different companies behind, they're hosting this device. And as a visitor to the website, you can go. We give you free tokens. It's in the testnet, so those are not the real IOTA tokens. But you can basically purchase the data in real time on those sensors. You retrieve the data. It's done securely, thanks to the mask authenticated messaging module. And we actually pay the sensor. So it's a sort of mini trial. And so, of course, it's a bit kind of challenging because suddenly you're in business simply because you have a connected device. And so the corporations are a bit kind of wondering, so what's my next move here? What's my future business model? And in order to achieve the resolution of this, we bring them together. So we've done some workshops where companies sit together and create new pilots about new future business models. Because the solution often is not inside your own organization, it's cross-silo, it's cross-sectorial. So together, they actually shape that new reality. The test bed in Sweden comes out of that process, for instance, and there's others coming. There's quite a few companies. When we launched it, we had 20 companies. Now we have about 70 players. We're not necessarily chasing them. We're trying to be quite selective into who is able to add new value to the ecosystem. Eventually, the data marketplace can be extremely powerful. Our role as a foundation is not to grow the data marketplace as a product. We just did this to inspire people, to show that they can do it. Smart city data marketplace is a massive area of opportunity where public sector can share data, not even ask for monetization, but they can use the same infrastructure than private sector, so that the sensor now can get paid, connected devices and so on. Interestingly, some early developments are actually from the data marketplace are not happening yet in smart city because there's maybe of the complexity, but they come from things that are very basic. So, from smart farming. So the milk producer in Norway is going to create a data marketplace to monetize the data from smart farms, from the cows, and protect the interest of all the farmers. So it's pretty interesting. In Norway, they were one of the most proactive players developing this whole system connected to the digital twin of the cow. Altogether, we are unleashing a lot of potential, and it's quite new. It's not innovation for energy or innovation for mobility. Our lens on the world looks different. It's about the machine-to-machine economy, the smart sharing economy, or things related to my data or GDPR as an opportunity. That's something we figured out by working with our partners, is that many business models, they are based on IoT, but if it's about a smart home, it's going to tell something about you as a citizen. So we need to ask authorization of usage of the personal data, and that's straight into this challenge related to GDPR. But IOTA can be used as a solution to develop a whole new approach, which is human-centric. So this is a theme that is coming up, and we'll be soon talking about it also on our website, and we had already some activities around this. And we have a collaboration with Taipei on Smart City that is starting to tap into this. So the Smart City journey for them is a citizen-centric Smart City. First, we put the identity of citizens on the tangle, and from there we grow innovation in the smart city context. Beyond business, we also work for social impact, and we recently announced a collaboration with the United Nations, and there will be different elements. Some of it will probably look into energy in emerging markets. As a foundation, we've been set up since November in Germany, but we are about 50 people, I think, in 18 different countries, so we're very decentralized and we're growing quite fast. We have different corporations that took a step forward. Bosch was the first multinational to invest in cryptocurrencies, and they did it in the IOTA token in order to do a step towards IoT-enabled business models. We have a board of directors that reflects our mission, which is to build a standard for the IoT together with industry. So we have representatives from Volkswagen, Fujitsu, and OMG to add a layer of commitment to standardize the IOTA technology. Today we focus a lot on reference cases, so identifying some really concrete, scalable solutions made for the industry, and we are going to learn out of this. So this year is going to be really interesting. We work as a co-creation hub, and that goes across all sectors, and we have a whole ecosystem that works together with us, involving startups, and this is where I'll give you the mic, Lewis, transition and talk maybe about technology and the ecosystem.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. My name is Lewis Freeberg. I'm the head of ecosystem for the IOTA Foundation. You might have to bear with me a little bit. I'm a little bit jet lagged. I just came from Asia, so I'm kind of probably going to be a little bit off, but yeah, hopefully we'll be able to get through this. We'll just talked about the kind of the more the co-creation aspects of what the IOTA Foundation is doing. We're looking at innovating with corporates and with the community at large to be able to implement this distributed ledger technology that we're developing. And so for me, I'm kind of came up as a developer within the community and built a lot of the proof of concepts that we've kind of seen today. Like I built the data marketplace and a few other implementations of IOTA technology. And now I work with the community to be able to foster innovation, get developers on board, and be able to create events that drive not only startups, but also innovation within corporates and governments. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about the technical side of IOTA. It's going to be pretty basic in terms of the tech. I'll kind of walk you through what the core innovation that IOTA has done, and kind of how it can be useful and ways in which you can implement it in order to create use cases. So, start off very, very basic. What is a distributed ledger? So, when you kind of think about the old legacy systems, you used to have your data in data centers or on a server. And that is where your data was. And maybe you had tape backups, but if there was a fire in the data center, you would lose all your data. And the reason for that is because it wasn't duplicated anywhere else. So you kind of move forward maybe 10, 20 years, and then you have the cloud. So the cloud was heralded as this innovation where we could have replicated data across many different data centers around the world. But even then, there's still outages. If AWS goes down for a couple of hours, most of the internet's broken. So the distributed ledger is something that is the next step on top of that. So how can we distribute information in such a way that there is no central point of failure, and even then there's no kind of distributed point of failure? As long as there are enough people replicating the data on the network, then it will be accessible. So in terms of the way you look at different systems, distributed ledgers really want to move away from a centralized or even decentralized system to something that is truly distributed. So by centralized, I mean, if you look at something like Netflix, a video streaming service, they have their servers which hold their information, and everybody goes to those servers to find that information. If that service goes down, there's really no way for you to be able to access that. And now with distributed ledgers, if you have a set of information or a program on these services, you're able to decentralize it in such a manner that it will be available even if there are faults within the network. So if you wanted to use an application on a distributed ledger that was in an affected area, you'd be able to still access it even if there was issues. Now in terms of the differences that we have from other blockchain technologies, while blockchain technologies do decentralize, they find it very hard to distribute quite evenly. When there is incentivization models regarding like block rewards and these types of things, where you have competitive proof of work, you start to have centralization of resources. So when you think about blockchain technologies, you think about mining farms and these types of things, where there's an incentive for people to put together resources to be able to gain these rewards. But with IOTA, we wanted a different approach. We wanted to be able to distribute it even further than that and decentralize it so that there is an incentive for you to interact with the neighbors around you, and there's no need for you to centralize your resources in a counterproductive manner. So the core innovation that we have is the tangle. So the tangle was kind of released in the white paper by Dr. Popov, a Brazilian professor of mathematics. And you can kind of see the kind of main contrast here is that instead of it being a linear chain of blocks, where you have one block linked by a chain in a sequential manner, what we have is a two-dimensional kind of graph in that sense, where you have a linear one-dimensional graph for blockchain, you have two in the tangle. And so what it really is a tangle of transactions. Each transaction here references two previous transactions and confirm the transactions before it. As people want to transact on the network, instead of you putting it in a queue to be put into a block, you attach your transaction to the end of the network and validate the ones previous to you. Now, when somebody else comes along to the network and they want to add a transaction, they have to validate your transaction and build upon it. So the more and more people start to use the network, the more and more transactions that are being validated and that are being referenced, and then they get eventually confirmed. So as Will talked about before, when you have a blockchain that has a static block time and a static block size, as you start to add more and more transactions into the network, the blocks fill up quite quickly. And what's the way to get your transaction into the next block is by incentivizing the miner. So what you start to have is these large transaction fees, which can be detrimental to people trying to build business models or use the network as a low, as somebody who doesn't have enough money to pay for these fees. So you think about an IoT device or somebody just wanting to transact for a coffee or something similar. So yeah, this is a classic bottleneck where you have limited space to be able to attach to, and you have an inordinate amount of transactions trying to join the network. But with IOTA, instead of it being a linear chain where there's only one attachment point, we have kind of a plethora of choices. The more transactions that join the network at any one time, they're able to reference different transactions and find an attachment point. So we're not particularly limited by the fact that there is only one point for you to attach to. Any transaction can jump onto the end of another transaction. As I said before, each transaction references two previous ones. These are chosen randomly, so you'll do a random selection of the end of the network. These are called tips. You'll reference two previous transactions that you see are valid. And then after a period of time, which is an adaptation period like you have in blockchain, your transactions will be confirmed once the rest of the network references your transaction, or once the end of the network references your transaction. And so we also have another feature that we use for anti-spam, which is we use proof of work, but this is not the same as the proof of work that you have in a regular blockchain like Bitcoin, where that is a competitive process where you have a lottery who wins the block reward. With IOTA, what we have is basically something which is like an anti-Sybil mechanism. So in order for us to reduce the amount of spam on the network and reduce the amount of data that can be added to the ledger, we use this small kind of algorithm to choose that you need to prove that you've done the work in order to attach to the network. So the kind of fundamental thing is that when you send a transaction on the IOTA Tangle, the user that is sending the transaction is the one picking the two previous transactions, validating it and sending it. There's no intermediary party that you require to be able to validate transactions for you. In blockchain, you have the miner, which charges a fee if there is a network congestion. So, as I said before, blockchains tend to centralize in the sense that you have resources and network control in terms of everyone pooling their resources together to be able to gain the block reward. But with IOTA, there's really no incentive for you to do that. There's no incentive for you to centralize your compute power or anything like that to be able to send transactions on the network. So therefore, individual devices who are sending transactions are able to have low resource requirements and transact with their neighbors freely. So the question is, why would we go and build something completely different, spend many, many years building this, and it's like, for what gain? How do we see this changing things? So what we really believe in is the machine economy. So not as scary as the what did you reference it before as? Yeah, no Terminators here. But looking at the ways in which it can improve our life and make things easier. A nice graphic of this is how we can see individual devices being able to transmit data for value and also being able to pay for goods and services. So you think about the internet router that has a connection to the internet, maybe a fiber connection, connecting to individual devices that have different resource requirements. So it would be able to sell bandwidth to devices that require more or devices that require less. And depending on bandwidth and congestion, it would be able to change prices for that and prioritize. You can also think about transactive smart grids, where you have individuals selling the excess surplus of electricity coming in from the solar panels during peak times to batteries that are able to store them and then sell them on later. So what really enables this kind of machine-to-machine economy is the fact that there are no fees in IOTA. So in the sense that there is a fee that you might need to pay to a miner in a blockchain, in IOTA you do the proof of work yourself, or you can choose to do it yourself, in which case there are no third parties that you need to pay. Because of this, you can kind of think of a lot of different use cases for it. So, for example, we are quite focused on mobility. We have a number of different ideas in which you are able to use a wallet given to a device to be able to make its life a lot easier. An autonomous vehicle in the future might find that it has an engine problem and drive to the mechanics and get itself fixed, paying for this service itself. But when you have a feeless platform, you're able to do payments for very, very small fractions of things. So thinking about it, driving on a toll road, you'll be able to pay per kilometre rather than paying per exit or anything like that. And also looking at parking, you could pay per minute of parking rather than going out to have to get a ticket and paying for it that way. Separate to the payment use cases that we have, that's just one element of what the distributed ledger can have. Because you are the validator yourself, there is no requirement for you to own any tokens. This is quite powerful. We are, I think, the only permissionless blockchain that you can send data through that doesn't require a fee. So if you think about trying to innovate as a corporate or a government with a permissionless distributed ledger technology, it's quite hard because, how do you send in a request to get, a few Ethereum or any type of token? With IOTA, you can just fire up a node, download the software and send a transaction on the network without having to pay anyone any fees. So this is quite useful for when you start to think about what you can use distributed ledgers for in terms of data immutability. So adding something into a distributed ledger sends that message all over the network, and it's very, very hard for it to be changed in the future. So when you have this, you can start to think about things like proof of existence. So what you can do is you can send a cryptographic hash of a document up to the network and verify that years down the track to see if that document has changed and validate its authenticity. And so, moving on from a document, you can kind of think about a digital twin, which is the digital representation of an individual device and all of its different states and balances. And this can be used in order to do audits or insurance or anything like that. So to move on to some use cases, you can think about the example that was given earlier of the smart charger from Nexus. So Harm van Brink built this wonderful charge station using off-the-shelf components. So all of the components you see behind me are standard parts in the electric charging industry. He used a standard computer with a 3G dongle and the standard off-the-shelf parts. And what he was able to do was build a smart charger that used IOTA tokens as the method of payment, and also to record the different transactions that have occurred. So we saw the video before where he has a comically sized car that is able to be charged, but all of the components that we used in this vehicle were again off the shelf using the ISO standards. So the vehicle is communicating directly over the cable with the car. The vehicle and the car don't know who each other are. When you think about different business models in terms of smart charging, a lot of them have to have, you have to have an account or a card that you swipe on the charger. This means that you have to be able to have a balance that is recorded somewhere on a third-party server that then that the charging station needs to go out and verify and come back for. With this charging setup, the car says, I have IOTA tokens. The charger says, this is how much is the electricity, and they do the transaction together. The car doesn't need to know who the charger is, and the charger doesn't need to know who the car is. So you have this direct transaction without any third-party servers, without any back-end infrastructure. The charger sending electricity, and the vehicle paying tokens. Moving on to something a bit more like industry, you can think about the ways in which you can have data authenticity in industry, looking at different factory setups, but also looking at doing custom pay per item stuff. So with this example here that was built by I think Akita Blockchain Solutions, they built this demo for Fujitsu, and they built an authenticity setup for the an example of an industry manufacturing plant. Each individual block here has its own QR code, its own identity on the tangle, and is able to be passed around a factory, and the devices are able to know which items have passed certain checkpoints and which haven't. And then finally thinking about how you can have a connected city or a smart city. So looking at all the different ways in which devices can be connected to each other and enable different and interesting use cases. So something that's already kind of been happening is the use of, can't really see that, but that's meant to be Taiwan, just in there. And so what they've done is some B Labs, I think, have put together a system that allows for the air quality sensor data to be drawn into the IOTA tangle, stored on the network for environmental purposes to be verified at a later date, which is something that's quite useful. And so the methods that we have to be able to allow this innovation are these second layer solutions. So the IOTA protocol itself allows for the transfer of a certain amount of information on the network. And so what you can do is you can build libraries on top of it to enable certain functionality. So a lot of the use cases that we've just talked about just then use something called master authenticated messaging, which is a messaging protocol that allows you to produce streams of data that have certain characteristics which are good for being able to sell it and also being able to permission access to it. So that means that you can tell a device you can have access to the next 3 packets, but you can not have access to any more. And so what you can do is you can have devices being able to purchase and sell information in many different ways. Another example of a second layer solution that we have is something called flash channels, which were built in order to allow for token streaming in a state channel. So this is off the network. You open up the channel, you deposit tokens into it, and you're able to send transactions offline in an instant manner. So when you're thinking about something that requires a large amount of transactions, like streaming electricity for an example, or also streaming, say, video, streaming per second or something like that, where you would have to do proof of work per transaction, what you can do here is remove that burden and still securely transact back and forth between 2 parties. And so the master authenticated messaging system is an example, was used in this example here, which was really the showcase for it, being able to have a web app where real devices are able to send streams of data into the tangle and have them read back in a user-friendly manner where somebody with a wallet in a browser is able to make a transaction and send tokens directly to the device. So all of these different use cases have been kind of built internally, and we're focusing on getting external corporates to be able to build out reference cases and be able to innovate with the IOTA technology. But what I really want to do is be able to empower the community to be able to build these use cases and share them themselves. So a lot of people have been making things in the Discord or even on Reddit. And so what we did is we launched the ecosystem platform, which is a place for people to come together and to share projects, tutorials and events, and be recognised by the community for the contributions that they've been putting in. So this is really useful for showing off what you can do. And in terms of what we have as a developer community, we're not so visible in that sense. We primarily have a communication channel on Discord. But for people who are interested in getting people to build things on IOTA, this is a very good way to show your skills off. And we have a number of different applications. I think we have over 1,000 different members on the site. We have a couple of hundred different projects that have been submitted and tutorials waiting to be approved. And so another function of the ecosystem website that we have is giving access to the EDF, which is the Ecosystem Development Fund. And so this is the donated funds that were used, that were given to us to be able to distribute out to the community in order to allow for this permissionless innovation to occur. Not only that, we are also interested in doing hackathons, which is something that we're interested in doing with Ecole 42, and also looking at promoting meetups and also education platforms for the Tangle. So yeah, thank you for bearing with me. Yeah.
So next up is
Q&A.
Q&A, yeah, sure. In French or English? English preferably, if you would, Lewis, to it directly.
If you want to talk, you must talk into the microphone because it's rigid.
Thank you. Thank you for explanations. Could you further a bit more how IOTA works? Like, if you're an object, do you have to be a master node to, full node, yeah, to secure another transaction? Or how can you secure a transaction without knowing if that transaction had enough funds to make that transaction? Or
Right. So are you asking about consistency, or are you asking about being able to make transactions?
it's like the how to secure transactions.
Okay.
If you are not yourself a full node, so if you don't know
Yep.
if that transaction had enough funds for doing this, like how can you manage to do this? And so will it be like a light node? So you would refer to another node, and that would be actually another way to be a decentralized ledger?
Yeah. So I mean, the question is, how do you ensure that the data that is being transmitted, how do you ensure that the balance that you are receiving is correct? And so this is an interesting question. This also rings true for data being put on the network. We talk about data immutability, but if you put bad data onto the network, you still have bad data that is authentic. So how do you solve this type of problem? So the way in which you do or try and mitigate these issues is by having a sample of different data points. So if you have the temperature in this room at the moment, you may not decide to trust one device, but have multiple devices be able to have sensor data drawn in and sent to you. What you would do is you would check all of those values and average them. So as a device that isn't a full node is looking to see the balance of somebody else, they might ask multiple different full nodes around them for the same addresses balance. And then if there is an inconsistency, the one you've been first sent is wrong, then you'll see that there are 7 out of 10 that say this and 3 out of 10 that say the other. And you would choose the one that has the highest number of confirmations.
How do you store data on the long term on Tangle? Do you have any pruning involved or things like that?
Yeah. So one of the ways in which we do this is proposed is with something called a permanode. And so the IOTA Tangle, by way of allowing for data to be stored on it, means that the size will grow quite large, or indefinitely actually. And so for resource-constricted devices like IoT devices, it's you can't put a 512 gigabyte SSD in them because that doesn't make sense. So the way in which we've kind of looked at it is that there are different roles within the network. So for a provider on the network or for a device on the network that is kind of like a librarian, something that would want to store the whole history of the Tangle, say something like a law firm that was doing proof of existence, if they wanted to have those hashes going into the future, they would have the storage, hundreds and hundreds of gigabytes available for them to store that information and then be able to share it back to whoever asked for it. Whereas a small device will only have a certain amount of space, and as it fills up, it will be able to get rid of that information that isn't required and only care about the last, maybe a couple of hours, a couple of days, or a couple of weeks of the Tangle's information.
Are you not worried with bandwidth issues? Because I've heard that EVM are facing similar issues, that the bandwidth is too high, so you need a better connection, so some full node can handle it. And
yeah. So the question is, how do you deal with bandwidth constraints? Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. So because we don't have blocks in the Tangle, the trade-off that you have in the blockchain is that you slow down the network so much that you're able to achieve global consensus, right? So you have a block hash, and that is the latest state. With IOTA, we favor eventual consistency. So we want availability over anything else. So for devices with resource constrictions, you would be able to transact locally, and then the information would be able to trickle back to the main network and be able to be synced with that at a later date. So while you may be sending, say, a low-value transaction, you will wait a certain amount of time to see if that transaction confirms. But if you were sending, $1 million through the network, you would wait a long time to make sure that the information is fully synced throughout the network.
Hello.
Hi.
Thank you very much for the presentation. My name is Roman, and I just want to know what was the incentive of running a full node of IOTA? Because, for example, for Bitcoin, people have incentive to run their full nodes because of mining, because they own new Bitcoins. But as there is no money creation for IOTA, what is the incentive for people to run a full node, and how could it be distributed as there is no incentive? Who run the full node?
Yeah, for sure. So I feel like maybe I have different information, but a lot of the Ethereum and the Bitcoin full nodes that are operated don't actually mine. So there is the mining pools are a separate entity, but all of the nodes on the network, they don't have any incentive either, right? So in terms of that, the reason that those people would run nodes and the reason that you would run an IOTA node is that you get access. If you think about if you have a mission critical application, say you're running a business use case on the network and you are relying on public nodes, somebody else's infrastructure, and they went down because somebody needed to turn on the kettle and they had to pull out the plug. Bad example, but you would lose connection, and that just isn't acceptable. So what you would need to do is you need to run your own infrastructure. You need to connect to the network yourself, and that would provide you with a certain level of service.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, my name is Mandaratia, and I founded a startup in connected vehicles. I would like to know more about car wallet, and also if I take an application that if I want to open the door of the car by my smartphone, how can you secure this transaction?
So I think there was a few questions there. One is about a car wallet. So how would you be able to implement a wallet into a car? I'm not particularly well versed with the electronics of a vehicle, but I could foresee a device within your car that's connected to the CAN bus, probably, in which you have an IOTA wallet, and so that is connected to the internet via, say, Wi-Fi or a 3G modem. That would be listening for transactions relating to its addresses. So if you wanted to open a vehicle, say for car sharing, you would have an individual, see the different cars available, where their locations are on the network, and then they would be able to send data to that address. Once it is received, then the vehicle would know to open the door. And so, with an example could be we have an example built with the Bosch XDK, which is a small hardware development kit, where we had a website that you were able to see data streaming out of the device using masked authenticated messaging streams. And one of them was locked, and you could send a transaction to the device would see it, and then it would release the data and open the system up for you. So you could think about this as a kind of an analogy for that.
Hey, I have a question. So, you hear me?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, I think so.
Okay. Okay. So earlier there was the question about what is the incentive for people to run a full node, a librarian, if you, or however you call it. And I think I found one. Cheating. For instance, Bitcoin is, let's say, very good for at least one thing, which is solving the double spend problem. I send you a Bitcoin, I send you a Bitcoin, and only one of you is going to receive it. here in IOTA, I can send you a Bitcoin, and ultimately a full node is going to detect that. But if I bribe enough full nodes with a tenth of a Bitcoin, a tenth of a Bitcoin, a tenth of a Bitcoin, I can achieve a business model and and double spending.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of being able to amass that type of power within the network, you would need to be kind of omnipotent. You would need to beat all of the other transactions. So if you had a race between two transactions, you would need to control half of the nodes on the network, if not more, which is a no easy feat. And so, for example, with IOTA and the way in which we envisage it being used in the future, at the moment we are on the internet.
Obviously, what you say is correct, but this is not what you said earlier. Earlier, you said that to validate a transaction, you are going to look at multiple points, like with the temperature sensor, and look at maybe 5 of them,
yep.
And that's it. Not all of them, 5 of them. So maybe you are looking at all of them? All the full nodes are going to look at all the full nodes, like in Bitcoin? I don't think so.
I don't think I understand the question.
Okay, you are saying that in order to achieve what I described as a evil business model, I need to have a majority of the network. I don't think so, because in IOTA, and not in Bitcoin, in IOTA, the full nodes are not going to talk to all the full nodes. They are going to talk to a few full nodes.
Right, and in Bitcoin it is different because all of the full nodes talk to all of the full nodes?
Yes.
Okay.
Indirectly, but yes.
Yeah, I mean, that's the same manner in which the information is shared through IOTA. There is a distributed network in which information is passed between neighbors of a device, and the information will be shared at some point with the other full nodes. So at some point the information will arrive that this is the incorrect. So I mean, maybe you would be able to do something if you controlled access to if you controlled the network in which a device was querying the information. Say they wanted to figure out a different balance or something like that, and if it wasn't using a secure protocol, they might be able to return a different balance value. But then again, you would need to control the full access of an individual device.
Okay, surely.
Maybe
you
we
must
can
be
discuss
true.
this later.
And how long does it take for the full network to synchronize?
That is a very open-ended question.
Because for Bitcoin, we know it's about 10 minutes.
Yeah.
For IOTA, it can be 2 years.
Or it can be 3 seconds.
Yeah, come on.
It depends on the
yeah,
network.
but as soon as it is deployed in real life, it's going to take a long time.
I think that we're getting more into questions of scalability, which is an active area of research that we're doing at the moment, and that everybody in the community is doing in terms of being able to have sharding or economic clusters and these types of things. So maybe I think this is a bit deep for this conversation, but we can discuss it later.
Hi, I'm Thomas. I read on your white paper that IOTA plans to use the MCMC algorithms to validate transaction. I was wondering if right now the MCMC algorithm is already implemented, or if you are still using a centralized validator to validate your transactions.
Yeah, so IOTA at the moment is definitely in beta. So we are still building the protocol and the software to be able to get to the point where we are one-to-one with the Tangle white paper. One of the kind of downfalls, while we have all of these great abilities in terms of feeless transactions and these types of things, is we require a high amount of transactions on the network. And so in order to achieve that, before we have that amount of transactions, is we use something called the coordinator, which is issues a transaction every, I think, 4 minutes or 2 minutes that reference previous transactions. And this is one way to keep the Tangle moving in the correct direction. And so when a transaction is referenced by this milestone, that is then considered confirmed. But on the network without a coordinator, you would use the MCMC algorithm in order to determine, pick the tips and be able to figure out whether the transaction is confirmed or not. So at the current state, we do not use that. We use the milestones as the reference.
And what makes you say that the network will be one day strong enough? As it is based on proof of work, and if an attacker wants to attack the network, he has to process more transactions than the whole network.
Yeah, so this gets back to the questions of scalability in terms of how you would be able to put more transactions through the network. In terms of the way that the networking works and having saturation in terms of bandwidth between nodes, this is, again, an active area of research that we are looking into and how to make sure that the network is sustainable in the long term without the coordinator. So.
Let's take one last question, and then we're going to move on a bit.
Yeah, hello, I'm David. I had a question because you spoke about spamming the network and how the proof of work prevents that, but you also have the coordinator that kind of prevents that and prevents the 34% attack.
Yeah.
So, but if there is a coordinator, why do you need the proof of work? How do they work in relation?
So in terms of the proof of work, that really also helps in terms of database size. So if you want to add more transactions to the network, you can just add information in, and that really kind of slows down the rate. So the transaction size is manageable in between snapshots.
All right, cool, thanks.
Cool.
Great. Lewis will still be there afterwards,
yeah,
right? So we can
still be here for
continue
questions
the
and
technical
things like
discussions. Yeah, thanks
Thanks so much.
So now we're going to shift a bit out of the technical topic to get more into the corporate world. And we have Andrew from INSEAD.
Okay. So I teach at INSEAD, which is a business school just south of here. And we have, over the years, we've built up an amazing group of alumni who do lots of corporate jobs. They do lots of startup jobs as well. And a couple of months ago, I had this idea, why don't I ask them about something we don't know, which is, where do you think the technology is moving? What technologies do companies use? And how the companies see the technologies in the next 2 to 5 years. And what I wanted to understand is which of the technologies that we all know, let's say AI, machine learning, blockchain, all those different kind of realities, which of these technologies people are using right now? Which of them are they planning to use in a couple of years, and which of them do you feel will be the most disruptive? So this was sort of set of questions number one. And set of questions number two was to understand how companies actually benefit from these technologies. So what are the, if you will, corporate strategy decisions that they need to make or they're trying to make in order to extract the most value? So far, I purposefully called this survey version Spring 2018 because I'll keep bugging our alumni and I'll also keep bugging executive program participants. So if they come to INSEAD to join some kind of a digital program, chances are me or my colleagues will ask them about this. So this is very much work in progress. But so far, we had over 300 responses. So given that 300 responses is not 3 million and not 30,000, it's still 300, but still I think the responses tell an interesting story. So if we begin by what are the past and future technological trends, and luckily I've got the colors here, that's great. So essentially I've asked them the question, so you've got different technologies. So you've got augmented reality, VR, mixed reality, blockchain, machine learning, big data analytics, AI, IoT, cloud, 3D printing, and then there's this amorphous other category. So which of these technologies have you used in the past couple of years to either create new revenue, to protect core business, improve operational efficiency, increase retention and loyalty of existing customers, find new customers, attract and retain talent? So which of these technologies did you already use? So it seems like big data and the stuff associated with big data like machine learning, artificial intelligence are the ones that dominate, and the big data analytics by far is the most important. And it seems that people are using big data for everything except perhaps attracting and retaining talent. So efficiencies, new revenues, loyalty of existing customers, finding new customers, you name it, people use big data for that. Now, if we go back to what what we're talking about, IoT, well, it actually seems that people haven't figured out IoT just yet. So IoT is not something that people are using yet, but they are using a lot of cloud. And in fact, cloud, this big yellow color, is actually about increasing operational efficiencies. So companies are relying on this technology. But having said that, if we look for the next couple of years, what's going to happen next? Is you can actually see that IoT, this bar is actually moving up. And people are actually looking at IoT to create new revenues, but I think they haven't really figured out how to use it yet. The other interesting thing is that the importance of blockchain goes up a bit. And in fact, if you slice the data by who the respondents are, so far the increase in the use of blockchain mostly comes from people who work with finance. So whenever you think about who would be the, so far at least, our alumni are saying that whoever is trying to extract value from blockchain, these are not the kind of Industry 4.0, these are not manufacturing people, these are still finance people. So this could be actually an interesting opportunity to develop this technology further. But so far, that's the state of the world. Now, I've also asked them the question, so which of the following technologies do you think will be the most disruptive for you? And what's interesting is that the blockchain people actually think is going to be highly disruptive. Blockchain and big data and artificial intelligence seem to be quite disruptive for the for the companies. Now, the least disruptive are 3D printing, cloud, which was actually driving the value creation in the past, but cloud seems to be something that people already have accepted, that's something they will have, and they will run with this for the future, but it's not going to disrupt their business. What will disrupt is, again, machine learning, big data, AI, and surprise, surprise, IoT will disrupt as well. So the learning, I think, from this one is that companies haven't figured out how to use IoT. They have figured out how to use big data. They have figured out how to use the cloud. But going forward, IoT actually will be one of those things which is going to disrupt the way companies are run. Now, there's actually an interesting question for me as a strategy professor. So how do companies actually leverage the new technologies? So will they actually build them internally? Are they building them internally? Are they partnering with startups? Are they partnering with corporate partners? Or are they actually going and buying them? Are they, in other words, do they actually go, grab startup, buy, and integrate? And so at least given from what we know from the survey, this is actually quite an interesting answer. So on the top, the question is, how many partners did your company form strategic alliances or joint ventures in the past 2 years that had something to do with the above digital technologies? So it seems like 30% of companies do it on their own, but 70% actually partner with somebody. And that's a big number, in fact, because we had about 20% of companies that over the past couple of years formed over 9 strategic alliances or joint ventures. So which means that if you are working to build a startup, for example, in fact, and actually, so let me even contrast that with this question. So how many acquisitions did your company make in the past couple of years to basically help you with your digital transformation? About 70% of companies did not do any acquisitions. So if you have a business plan and you think that I'm going to build a startup and I'm going to be bought by a company and sort of make a lot of money, well, chances are that won't happen. That's the one thing that in fact jumps out of this. But having said that, you actually are likely to be partnering with them, which essentially means that you will be working with them as a collaborator, but they will not invest equity in your business. And in fact, chances are you'll be working with lots of companies. I'm not sure Angie was here or not, but chances are that you actually will have to work with companies that also have a lot of partners as well. So you won't be the single collaborator. And you have to figure out, how do I stand out from the rest of the potential partners that are working with this company? But on the other hand, that actually, the reason why companies are doing that is because they want flexibility. If you actually buy somebody, the reason why they don't want to buy startups is they don't want to be stuck with them. And once you're stuck with a startup, it's not really value creating for the company. They actually prefer to partner. There is another question which we asked about, startup accelerators, and you know what they are, right? So startup accelerators are the places where companies recruit startups. Lafayette Plug and Play would be one of them here in Paris, where they basically run the beauty contest between multiple startups. They grab 2, 3, 4, 5, and they keep them for several months. So do companies actually use that on the regular basis? The answer is mostly not. So if you think that companies, startup accelerators are so popular and companies are doing that, they're jumping over themselves, the answer is no. Over 60% of companies we responded to actually did not participate in any startup accelerator. But then about 30% of companies actually do work as a part of accelerators, and a very small number of startups actually work as a part of the accelerators as well. Now, if you are if you are joining an accelerator, the question for you as a startup is, what kind of accelerator should I join? What kind of accelerator is going to create the most value for me and my corporate partner? And as it happens, you actually want to join an accelerator where you actually have people whose job is to connect you as a startup to the rest of the corporate partner. And from what I know, Plug and Play just recently they actually only recently started hiring these people whose full-time job, or like a part-time job, will be to work with startups and connect them on a regular basis to the corporation. And this is very important because in a lot of accelerators that you will join there will be lots of show and tell, there will be lots of selection, there will be lots of interaction between you and the corporate partners, but the corporate partners would not commit the people whose job will be to connect you to them on a regular basis. And that will be the problem, because whatever ideas you generate, whatever kind of business projects you will try to push, big organizations are hugely inert and they may not actually follow up on. And that's something to watch out for. And what we've done, we actually asked companies about their satisfaction with the accelerator programs. And what we found is that if the company actually had that person or those positions whose job would be to connect startups to the rest of the corporate world on a regular basis, you actually had close to 75% satisfaction with the accelerator. If you actually were a part of an accelerator where you did not have a person whose job is to formally connect you to the rest of the corporate world, you only get about 40% satisfaction rate from that accelerator. So again, for you as a startup, I think the lessons are that you actually want to be prepared that you wouldn't be bought. You have to be prepared that you would work as a partner with the corporate in the best case scenario. One of the vehicles that you would work with your partner will be the accelerator, but you should join the accelerators where actually they make a serious effort to connect you to the rest of the corporate world. And the sort of, I just wanted to go through who the respondents are, but I think I won't do it because I don't in the sort of, we got about 316 as I mentioned. So what will be some of the key takeaways from my brief presentation? Well, blockchain and IoT will have a bright future for the next 2 and 5 years. So if you're interested in IoT and that intersection, that seems like, people believe that's where the future is. I think once you've identified a problem to solve, either on the hackathon or in the other way, start a company and join an accelerator. You actually need to work with the corporate partners who are serious about working with these startups. Again, partnerships are important drivers of growth. Think who could you partner with. And last but not least, if you are coming from the coding background, I think a lot of temptation that coders, computer scientists have is to solve a computer science problem. But that's not what your potential corporate partners want. They don't want to solve a computer science problem. You should solve a problem which either helps your partner lower their costs, and you have to demonstrate how your solution helps them lower their costs, or improve efficiency, which means that they can do something faster, increase their revenues. Again, if you can demonstrate that, that's great. They will be very happy. Retain or attract new customers. They will be happy as well. And again, don't just focus on technology, because at the end, nobody cares about technology. The point is, as Google people like to say, what is the problem that you're solving? And that's all I had to say. Thank you. And I'm not sure I'm going to get the question about IOTA protocol. So.
Shoot the question.
Could you please make the distinction between AI and machine learning?
So AI and machine learning, I think to my mind, the distinction is that the artificial intelligence, something which could make decisions for you, I would think. And the machine learning is still, you probably would need human to train the machine. And AI is something probably would both, in my mind, both the training the machine and get the output from the machine. So I think AI would be something which is, at least in my uneducated mind, something which is more advanced version of machine learning. And for that, of course, you need big data. So if your question is how the three are related, clearly you need big data for both. And from AI, you go to from big data, you go to machine learning. From machine learning, you go to artificial intelligence.
Yeah, I agree. One is the subset of the other.
So one, I think, is higher order sort of manifestation of the other.
Yeah, thank you. Second quick question. About the people that participated to the survey, you said most of them see blockchain interest in finance, but
Yes.
maybe 45 of them are working in finance, so it is biased. So what is the people participating in terms of industry?
I'll show you what what. In fact, I wanted to skip that, but you obviously did not let me. So so these were the people who responded. I've asked them what are the industries that your companies are working for, and when basically we got a whole bunch of different industries from agriculture and forestry to manufacturing, wholesale, retail, trade, information, which would be more like IT.
Very diverse. Thank you.
So finance, insurance, management consultants. So it actually is, so for a practical thing, if you want to run a survey, use SurveyMonkey. I don't own that company, but it was very useful because all of these graphs, I generated them basically over a couple of hours. So that's very, very useful. Yes, so there's a row.
Cool. Let's have one more question. And then
Yes. Just to add the question, I had the intention to ask you the same question than him, but I just want to add one more question about it. Where are the companies from? France, from abroad? It's interesting to know that because all the countries are not in the same advancement about IoT, IOTA, and machine learning and so on.
So I don't have that slide, but I've asked them the question, which businesses are you operating? And they told us that pretty much, there were respondents from all over the world because our alumni, they actually work all over the world. And this was in Europe, this was in America, this was, in fact, it was actually interesting. So there were no startups which said, for example, that they worked in Africa, but there were about 30% of corporate, respondents who actually said they had an operation in Africa. There were about, 70% of companies which said they had operations in Europe, but they also had operations in Asia and the US. So sort of our, the reason why this survey is actually quite interesting is because it actually captures alumni from all over the world. So this is not just France. Okay. But I totally agree with you that, some countries maybe, or some continents, some regions may have an uneven level of growth. But again, so we only have 300 respondents, so we couldn't really we almost could produce those different tables for different regions, but I think they won't be super reliable because we only have 300 responses. Really? But if we meet next year, we may have 1,000 responses, so I can show you much more detailed distribution about stuff around the world.
Yes, even in Asia. Even in Asia, okay.
So even in Asia, Latin America, North America, Europe, Australia.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Cheers, Andrew.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
So we're going to go to our last speaker, Philippe from NG Lab. There's actually, without you knowing all the details, but there's actually a linkage between all those parties. IOTA was in Singapore back in November, doing a pilot project at the INSEAD Business School. It was yeah, and we did this project to kind of challenge the students to generate new business model. At that time, actually, NG in Singapore was the thematic sponsor, so that was a first step into collaborating all together. Now, Philippe is working in NG Lab in Paris, so feeds into a different side of NG. And we started to collaborate through the data marketplace that was mentioned earlier, right? So that was the first linkage, and since then we continue, and feel free to go on.
Okay. So thank you everyone to be here. I know I am the last guy between beers and pizza, and it's always important. So I will go very fast, and thank you to be here today. So first, some points, because I'm representing NG Lab, I will only speak for NG Lab. I will not speak for NG and the whole company, because we are a big group. And the second one, because this event is streaming, I will not share any information, all the information about what we are doing in the lab regarding the blockchain technology. So first, I am the responsible for the lab for computer science and artificial intelligence in NG. So we are a team of around 30 people, but 16 are working in our core activities around AI. And we are a quite international team, so from 8 nationalities and mostly PhD in math and computer science, 5 women and 11 men. And we are based in Paris. And we work in artificial intelligence with a strong focus on computer vision and NLP. We have as well a work on what we call distributed autonomous system, which is related to blockchain. So this is our activities. We are 4 main activities. The color is not so good, but the first one is artificial intelligence. The second one is around interoperability in digital ecosystem. We have something in cybersecurity with our academic partner in the south of Paris, in Saclay. And we work in what we call infrastructure for intelligent agents, which is a multi-agent system and blockchain technologies. So we are not specialists or experts in blockchain. We are more focused in the other topic, but we are working since almost 2 years on it, mostly in proof of concept and project. So for those who doesn't know exactly what is energy, we have a big change of paradigm in energy. So the picture on the top of the slide is the normal process where you, from the left, you produce energy from a central power point. You transform this energy, you make the transportation, and you transform again, you make the distribution, and at the end, the client is receiving energy, which is what we call mostly the old energy world, which is a very top-bottom view of the energy world. And we are moving, thanks to the digitalization, mostly in technology, information technology, to something that we call the new energy world, which is quite different for big actors like Engie. So we are producing, consuming, and sometimes storing energy in a decentralized way, which is everybody can produce his own energy, store it, sell it. And that's why blockchain could be interesting in this kind of a situation. So now I will present some use case in energy. I will not say if we work on it, but you can make your own opinion. But it will give you a landscape about what the people are doing in energy. So the first most famous use case in energy is the Brooklyn use case with a transactive grid in Brooklyn back to 2015, I think it was Hello3, where people connected some solar panel and tried to share energy between them, and using the blockchain technology, it was Ethereum at this time. So it's a typical one, it's the most famous one, but since then, we develop a lot of use case in energy. And you have to check or to focus on the title like energy trading, peer-to-peer exchange. This is a big area where energy companies are focusing now. So energy trading, you have some initiative where you try to develop some trading platform. This is an example in Europe. It's most with European actors. You try to make trading around energy. You have everything around peer-to-peer exchange, where for every kilowatt that you produce in a decentralized way, you earn some coin. So, and you share this investment depending on your involvement in this process. You have something with tenant and zonen, where it's more related to the core business or core activities of energy, where you try to stabilize the power grid using some batteries. So you use the zonen battery to stabilize the power grid. You have something in the microgrid and community energy. It's a very interesting use case because we collaborate in some kind of community, energy community around some microgrid, and they will exchange services around energy, like car sharing is one, or with a charging station. You can have one in your community, and you can build your exchange around energy based on it. So there is an initiative in Germany. TVL is one. We are partner in another initiative, which is the Energy Web Foundation. And there is as well some people are creating currency around energy. So this is some of them. So you have Urkraft and Energy Coin and Solar Coin. You can decide if it's accurate or no, especially if you look at solar coin. But the other one have some different approach where you exchange or you make at the front of the production consuming energy some coins that you can trade for services. One of the most important thing, perhaps we didn't speak so much so far, but for us it's very important, or for my lab it's very important. It's the concept of oracles. So oracles is basically an hardware that can certify the data coming from him. And if you look at the energy, especially if you are billing some people or you make a bill at the end of the month, you need to be sure that the data is coming in the blockchain or in the system, it's quite secure or certified. So there is already company, perhaps NG as well, who are building some oracles. You have some of them here. They are presented 2 months ago. So Smart Inverter, Slock IT is a very famous one, and FlexDAO as well. You have already spoke about it, the data thing about GDPR. Or you sell your data, you share your data in a secure way. You can use the blockchain, and the data marketplace is one of a great tentative to do it. And this is another thing, but probably not accurate here. It's energy for blockchain, where you have like a container when you can provide off-grid mining in a specific use case. So what we are doing in NG, so it's very not so much information in this slide, but you can imagine that in every part you have some project, but I cannot reveal, but at least a topic. So we are a lot of around energy, around community of energy that you can easily understand for NG that we have to move to decentralized energy paradigm. We are doing something around tracking and certify. It's the most famous use case when you use a blockchain. So you can imagine tracking energy or tracking assets, or I would say something that you use to produce energy. We have something around cyber and IA, more with our academic partners, because it's a strong element of the blockchain. And we have, of course, we use IOTA, a collaboration oriented to the data marketplace, and more in a perspective way, M2M ecosystem, because we have in energy some charging station, the electric mobility and so on, and we think that IOTA could be one of the answer. But the main idea, and it was already said, we are focused on the use case. The most important is the use case, it's not the technologies. And we try to be technology agnostic, but because depending on the use case, you choose this blockchain or the other one. And I think IOTA could be accurate for specific use case. So this is what we are doing, mostly energy, mobility, industry 4.0, because NG is not only doing energy, we are doing a lot of things in transport, in smart cities, and so on. So we try to support exchange of different energy fluids. So different energy fluid means electricity, gas, hydrogen, and so on, between different actors. And when you have different actors and you don't have any trust or not so much trust between these actors, and it's complex, you can use blockchain technologies, especially for microtransaction. When you share a little bit of energy, very small, that the transaction is not very interesting for big system. We try to support physical and digital electric mobility. So energy is producing energy, so you have electric car in the city, so it's a very interesting use case for us. That's why IOTA is as well an interesting partner. And we have a lot of assets. What we say asset is like a wind turbine, solar panel, very large solar panel field, combustion asset to produce electricity, and all these things we try to digitalize this asset to better understand how they work and to make everything around predictive maintenance, or as well exchange transaction between this asset directly. So this is another part of our use case. And basically, I think it's more difficult to connect the physical world with real asset to the blockchain as only exchanging coin or Bitcoin between people. When you have to connect the asset, you have to be sure that this is the right asset. It's not tampering by someone else, and you have as well cybersecurity constraints. So you cannot connect everything, and especially if you are running behind some smart contract, and the smart contract is not good. I think it become a big issue for us. So that's basically what I wanted to say, 10 minutes. So if you have any question, this is my email. We have already someone from École 42 in our team. We are always interested in smart people, so if you want to join us, smart, or a little bit not so smart, so it's okay. But send us an email, and we are looking for developer and as well people who are working in the blockchain technologies. That's it.
Thanks a lot. Before you just leave, remember there's pizza and beer. François Xavier from École 42 had to leave for an important meeting. But we wanted to first thank all the participants, Andrew, everybody that joined, as well as people that helped us organize. Pierre down there has helped us put everything together. In 2 weeks' time, 3 weeks' time, on the 11th and 12th of June, we're going to run a hackathon. It's part of a 2-day event organized by École 42 together with other university partners. There will be a blockchain part and there will be an IOTA part. Together with NG, we will bring the theme that is of interest, most probably around smart cities and energy and so on, available to challenge the students to come up with a great innovation. And what we're going to do over the 2-3 weeks to do is actually to match up the students with other types of disciplines. So it's going to be an open process. We're going to define how it works, but we will open the gates to other universities, innovators outside the school to come up with their skill set to consolidate multidisciplinary teams. It could be INSEAD students. It could be legal advice from a consultancy. We don't know. We're going to create teams that are multidisciplinary to compete not on just a technical solution based on code, but actually potentially a viable business model. That will be a really interesting process. We look very much forward to that. And of course, you're invited to apply for that process. We'll communicate through the website of École 42 how to do that, and we'll probably set up also a dedicated website. So thanks, everybody, for joining us tonight. Sorry? So what about those that are not from the school? So the process that I mentioned is actually open to everybody, right? Yeah. So it's not specifically the coders, most probably come from the École 42, but then the rest is open to you, right? So if you want to be part of it, you'll just be able to join or apply for at least, and we'll figure it out. Thanks, good. Thanks a lot, everybody. Let's get some beers.